to do each and every little thing. But what good does it bring if I ain't got you? If I ain't got you, oh, you don't know what it's like, baby. You don't know what it's like to love somebody, to love somebody the way I love you. My friend, I see your face again. I know my frame of mind. You ain't got to be so blind, 'cause I'm blind, so very blind. But I'm a man. Can't you see what I am? I live and breathe for you.
Good afternoon.
But what good does it do if I ain't got you? If I ain't got you, oh, you don't know what it's like, baby. You don't know what it's like to love somebody, to love somebody the way I love you. You don't know what it's like. You don't know what it's like, baby. You don't know what it's like.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Can you hear me all right? Barely. Okay, I can speak up. Is that better? The first thing I'd like to do is introduce myself. My name is Paige Zanuck. The S and the J are silent. That's how we pronounce it. It's Polish. It's Polish. My name is Polish and should be like Januk, but we pronounce it Zanuck, the American way. So that's who I am, the chair of the election committee. So the first thing we'll do is stand as you're able and say the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. So we're here, as you know, for the candidate forum. We have 3 candidates for 2 positions. The voting will begin Wednesday, October 18th, and end on November the 8th. If you're voting electronically, you have until midnight to get that vote in on the 8th of November. If you want to vote by a paper ballot, you'll have to go to the admin office and do that. And they close on Friday, so 3 o'clock on Wednesday. 3 o'clock Wednesday, November the 8th, is the last minute you have to vote by paper. So I guess without anything else, I'll just introduce the candidates. We have on my immediate left, Larry Santora. Next to him is Chuck Kill. And then at the end is Campbell Chaney. And they drew numbers before you arrived to see who would speak first, and Larry Santora has the honors. So with nothing else, we'll just get started.
All right, let's see if this works. Can everyone hear me? A little more? Here we go. All right, see, they were trying to rig this vote from the beginning here. So don't start my time yet until I start talking, okay? But anyways, I'm Larry Santora. Grew up in Seattle, left in early '68 to join the Naval Air Corps. Did my stint in Vietnam, and then my first duty station was down in Key West, Florida, where my wife came down and got married in a little chapel down there. So while there, we discovered something called sunshine. Now, we didn't know about that when we lived in Seattle. So after I got out of the Navy, we packed up a truck, brought our 9-month-old son down here, and I went to school at the U of A, worked at the mines, put myself through school, got an accounting degree, and I was one of 2 people hired by then the big 8 accounting firms. Spent 6 years with the firms and then started my own firm, and 35 years later decided that's enough. So that's my public accounting experience. Most of my clients were construction, R&D companies, things like that. We had rentals for 29 years. We had as many as 27 rentals where my wife did the management of the individuals. She did all the painting, and I did all the repairs and maintenance. So I learned a lot about construction then. In fact, in our family, I learned a lot from my uncles and my dad because we built homes and we built cabins and things like that. So we built 3 homes ourselves, and we did a lot of the work ourselves. I've done electrical, I've done plumbing, I've done concrete work. You name it, I've done it. In fact, with our church group, we would go around the world building schools and churches for our missionaries. Anywhere. I was in Tonga, I was in Africa, I was in Paraguay, in Costa Rica, Belize, a lot of different places. What they made me do, or asked me to do, was concrete work, laying block, framing, and building trusses. So there you go. That's my construction experience. Flagstaff. Let me talk about Flagstaff just for a minute. Does anyone here have a timeshare up in Flagstaff? Okay, nobody here. So anyways, I got a Flagstaff unit, timeshare unit, back in the early 90s, and the units were built in the 80s. And in that time period, the facility was going downhill at an alarming rate. When you go to these places, you are then given a card where you can mail it in and grade your experience there. And our grades are going down, down, down. So a group of us got together and decided that our board probably wasn't doing a very good job. So we got on the horn with our 5,000-6,000 owners and talked to them and had a vote and removed that board, put a new board in, and then we realized that we had a management company that did everything and they were doing a poor job, so we removed them and self-managed. So it was my job as the CPA to determine how we can save costs and do a better job for the owners. One of the first things we did was we looked at our laundry. We were losing up to 30% of our linen by sending it to Phoenix every week to be cleaned. So I did an analysis on putting in a laundry facility. That included, do we do 2 shifts with a small facility or do a larger facility with 1 shift? Well, wages are a lot more money than equipment, so we did the 2 shifts. It also allowed us to buy much better linen, higher quality, spa-like stuff. And we didn't lose any linen. The next thing we did was our maintenance. We used to hire that out, and the people did a horrible job. So we hired a bunch of maintenance people. Then we did our housekeeping, same thing. The thing with housekeeping is you got to have a lot of people in a short period of time, and it's very difficult. But our manager, I hired our manager, and I practically lived on the phone with him for the first 2 months. But, you know, when you're hiring a lot of people and managing those people, it becomes a real shock to the system when you haven't done it before. But we did that, and what happened was that I resigned 2 years ago, and when I resigned, we were rated the 2nd best timeshare in the Western region for our size, going from a place that was falling apart to the 2nd best. A timeshare is a lot like the HOA here, except that we had to take care of the units also. But we had the same kind of facilities. We were kind of tied at the hip to the Continental Country Club. We worked very closely with them on the restaurant facilities, on workout facilities, on the golfing, and we worked very close together on how we would budget for all that stuff. So anyways, during that time in Flagstaff, we had the lowest HOA fees of any timeshare unit our size in the whole United States. And we held that for years. Obviously, when COVID hit, I resigned, and things start changing. So there's my experience there. So why am I running for the board now? I've been here since 2010. We had a home up in Lakeside, Arizona, and a big motorhome, and we were only spending 6 months of the year here. And you can't be on a board like this. It's a year-round job. It's not a 6-month job. So a couple years ago, I had some medical problems where it ended up I couldn't even drive the motorhome anymore. And I had a little depression going on, and we ended up here for the summers. I found a doctor that did a radical procedure on your back, and he totally restored my whole spine, and I'm actually able to walk again. And I don't fall down a lot. So that was a big improvement. So we were on a month-long road trip, got home the end of September, and I saw the call for candidates, and I thought to myself, I've got 26 years experience in HOAs. I was the head of actually 3 homeowners associations, one where we were responsible for the roads. I have 35 years in public accounting. You know, maybe there's some things I can bring to this HOA. And let me give you just a couple of examples. I was going through the financials. A few things led me to some concerns. And I'll just mention a couple of them so you get an idea of the breadth of my knowledge and what I look at. I was looking at our food service. Let's talk about the preserve for a second. Our food costs are 47.5% of our sales. The industry average is 27 to 28%. Where's all that food going? Good question. A demander should be asked what's happening with your food. You can't possibly have that much spoilage. Now, Mountain View, the costs were only 35%, which is a lot better than 47, but still high. Another thing, just to give you an example, is your liquor costs. When you, and I'm going to talk about fifths, because us old folks, we remember what fifths were, not liters. Out of a fifth, if you're doing a real nice pour, say an 1.5 ounces to 1 3/4 ounces, you should get 14 to 17 pours out of a bottle. Your first 4 pours should pay for that bottle. The rest is pure profit. Now, when I looked at the costs here in the liquor, they're doing a good job. Okay, so that number is correct. So my question is who is watching these numbers on a monthly basis, and why aren't some of these questions being asked? Now, I know our manager has stated that he's not an accountant, and he doesn't realize, doesn't understand some of these numbers, but that is the sort of thing that a little instruction over time will bring him to understand a lot of the stuff so that he can manage properly. Geez, I only have 2 minutes left, I better hurry. So the next thing I'm looking at is the golf course. We're paying $462 per house over the next 5 years to pay this loan. This loan is costing everyone $2,300. I don't remember where we had a vote on doing this golf course, and everyone that I've talked to is just a little upset about what's happened here. And my feeling is that if you're going to spend that kind of money, you should put it to a vote of the owners here. And when I mentioned in my resume that I felt that people should have more respect, the thing that brought me to that was every time they come up with a new rule, the next thing you read is, here's what we're going to do, how we're going to penalize you if you don't follow these rules. We're going to fine you. We're all grown-ups here. To me, that's not respect. So the attitude has to change towards the owners. We own this place. Now I'm down to 1 minute. The last thing I want to say is that, well, I'll save this for a question. I hope it comes up. My brother told me, he lives in Tucson, down up here. He said, you guys live in fantasy land up there. And the more I thought about it, the more I think he was right. I just hope that we can keep it fantasy land. Thank you.
Thank you, Larry. One thing I meant to do and failed to do it is thank everyone for coming. So thank you all for being here today. Our next candidate that will speak is Campbell Cheney, and he's on the far
I'm at the
left.
other end.
He's at the end.
My background, I came to Saddlebrook in May of 2021, so just a couple of years ago, after spending 35 years in the San Francisco Bay Area, and I came here following my December 2020 retirement. Now, I have a background in finance, a little bit different than your normal corporate finance person who pores over budgets or is in the accounting department crunching numbers. I came in finance as an investor in the financial services space. We invested mostly in banks and real estate companies. We did this through hedge funds, private equity investments, structured finance, those types of things. So when I come to look at financial institutions or financials, the skills that I accumulated over the years on the Wall Street, if you want to call it that kind of investing, financial analysis, general economic dynamics, following the economy, how economies pushes and pulls organizations such as this, ability to read, anticipate market behavior and market directions. We do this, the hedge fund, with short-term investments. We looked at market dislocations and disruptions, short-term profits, if you will. A good example of that is earlier this year, we had a major bank failure. Silicon Valley Bank out of Palo Alto failed. The market went into a huge dislocation. If I were still working for hedge funds, we would have used those dislocations to make heavy investments. It's things like that. The private equity world, where I was doing private equity investments, longer term, 10-year type of investments. And with those type of investments, you look for capital appreciation. You put money in, you manage that money, make sure that the company is growing the way it should be growing, that the business plans, the business models are being followed, things like that. That is a very slow capital appreciation. So that was kind of my world. I'm currently the treasurer of the corporation, and I'm also a board member, as well as Chuck. We're running for re-election. So my path to the Saddlebrook board was relatively quick. I joined the golf committee in January 2022 because I was looking at the financials, like Larry was, and saw the golf course was losing, at that time, about $500,000 a year. And I thought maybe I could step in and look at some of the ways that I could create some efficiencies in the operations and things like that. I was also asked by the golf committee chairman, Matt Cambick, to be the golf committee liaison to the finance committee because they have those liaisons between committee members. So I did that. It became quick that I had an investment background and was invited to join the investment subcommittee. Now, the investment subcommittee is in charge of managing our investments that we have, several $1 million worth of investments. Unfortunately, I couldn't join the investment subcommittee because I was not a member of the finance committee. So I was asked to join the finance committee, which I did. So now I'm on two committees. I've only been here less than a year. Fast forward a few months, in July 2022, I was asked to run for the board. There was a board opening. Board is looking for some bench strength in finance, and I happily accommodated, threw my hat in the ring, and lo and behold, became a board member through a special election in July of 2022, a little over a year ago. But what's important is, what are the duties of being a director? I want to talk about that for a second. There are three primary duties of being a director as I see it. First and foremost, a prime directive, if you will, is to protect and improve home values and resident experiences. That is a very tough job. We have quite a bit of very old infrastructure that, if it is not well maintained, will start to impact the community and qualitatively will harm and impact your home values. Because if someone drives in and sees holes in the road, cracks in the road, potholes, things like that, overgrown, level 5 common areas, they're not going to want to live here. So we got to keep that maintained. And we've worked very hard this year to make sure that the money is available for that to happen, as well as putting plans in place. We also, another duty is to create and plan for the future. We've really been living, again, I've only been here for a couple years, but it looks like we've been living here status quo, just trying to get through the year. We need future plans. We're working on those. We've got a strategic plan that we're working on right now, and I'll talk a little bit about that in a few minutes. And lastly, governance and policy setting. That is a duty of an HOA board. We're doing that. One example that's on the horizon here that's been kind of a cause celeb over the summer is dog walking on the golf course. We're looking into that. We'll have something more to say in the next board meeting or one after that. Current status of the community. 3 years ago, we had COVID, we had supply chain issues and shortages caused by that. That really shifted the ground under the feet of the community and threw us off balance for our long-term planning. I think we're starting to get back into that, but then we get where we're standing now with high inflation. High inflation continues to further complicate long-term financial planning. You don't know what next year's costs are going to be. You certainly don't know what 5 years hence costs are going to be. It complicates things, but we're working very hard on that. As I said, we've got 25-year-old buildings, common area infrastructure. They need high-cost renovations, and we do this because we want to protect and increase your home values. We don't do this because of anything else. We think it has to happen. Finally, why am I running for re-election? This is, as we all know, we're all here to be retired. We're here to enjoy life. Contributing to this is a full-time job. I work probably at least 25, maybe more hours a week on this kind of being on a board. The re-election, I'm here because I want continuity of projects underway, continuity of effort. I said we have several projects underway. I don't want to leave them midstream. That includes the multifaceted strategic plan, creating a mission, vision, and long-term direction for the community, long-range financial planning for the community. We are underfunded. Our reserve is underfunded. A lot of that because of COVID threw us off balance, as I said before, but we are underfunded. We need to catch up. We need to make these large investments soon. Over the next 10 years, we have a reserve study out. It's hidden in plain sight on the website. It's a reserve study. It says we need to spend $43 million over the next 10 years. Simple math is that's $4.3 million a year we got to put into the infrastructure to keep it well maintained. We're not putting that in there. We put maybe $3 million this year. We put less in prior years. We've got to catch up. And lastly, I do want to say that I appreciate being here and I want to run for re-election, but the choice is yours. It's your community. You get to choose which one of us is going to represent you for the next 3 years. Thank you.
Thank you, Campbell. And our last candidate to give his 10-minute presentation will be Chuck Kill.
Thank you. First, I wanted to thank the election committee, Paige, Cash, and Mike for all the hard work that they put into putting on this candidate forum. I know it's not easy to do, but thank you for that. I have been the HOA2 secretary for the past 2 years. I am also one of the 2 board liaisons for the Rules and Regulations and Architectural Landscape Committee, in addition to the board liaison for the Saddlebrook Public Affairs Commission. I grew up in Chicago on the south side, inner city. Lived in 8 states before I moved here in 2003. Been here for 20 years now and love the area. Moved out to Saddlebrook in 2019. Best move I ever made. My background includes having earned my MBA in finance as well as being a CPA. I was an auditor with a CPA firm in addition to being an auditor on the international audit staff for the First National Bank of Chicago. I was a CFO and CEO for several retailers over the last 30 years of my career, including being vice president of finance for a chain of 43 full-service restaurants. And CEO and CFO for Bedmark, the largest mattress retailer in Arizona. As CEO of Bedmark, my team increased profits from $125,000 per year when I got there. 4 years later, we had profits of $2.5 million a year through changes that the team put together. I have also had experience in the retail area as Director of Employee Benefits and Risk Management for a $1 billion retailer up in the Seattle area. My nonprofit experience includes being the chair of the Finance and Audit Committee for the town of Oro Valley. And I was there when they were considering buying the El Conquistador Club and also considering removing one of their golf courses in the area. And I was also the co-chair of the Finance and Bond Committee for the Tucson Unified School District for several years. Prior to being elected to Saddlebrook Board of Directors 2 years ago, I was a member of the Finance Committee and also the Strategic Planning Committee. Over the last couple of years, I'm proud of the accomplishments of the Saddlebrook Board of Directors. Some of the many accomplishments your board has had over the past 2 years include working with the Saddlebrook Pickleball Association and Ropeson. We added 14 new pickleball courts to support the growing Saddlebrook pickleball family. We renovated the 27-year-old Mountain View Golf Course to a world-class golf course. We just opened 9 holes recently, and the other 9 will open up in a few weeks. We moved the golf shop from the Rincon Room to a permanent location in the old Mesquite. We added the Rincon Room to the fitness and table tennis portfolio. Funded the level 4 and level 5 common area that was approved by a prior board, as well as having Ray adding Michael Park, a well-qualified CAM director with excellent credentials. He is a welcome addition to the common area team. He brings to the table things that we didn't have before, and I think we're welcoming him to help us straighten out the CAM over the next year or two. Using the surveys developed by the McMahon Group, which we brought in, and completed by you, the homeowners, the board is in the process of completing a long-term strategic plan to guide current as well as future boards over the next 7 to 10 years. This should give us some continuity of the planning and strategic planning for the board as well as the management team. Over the next 3 years of my new term, my goals are to listen to the voice of the residents. I think that's one thing that's been lacking over the last, this board and previous boards. We need to make sure that we understand what the homeowners want before we go ahead and do it, and make sure we listen to them of all their concerns before we pull the plug and vote on certain items that we are adding. The new items that we need to work on in the next few years include fiscal responsibility by the board. Many residents feel the assessments are too high, and the board should try to keep any increases to a minimum. That said, as Campbell mentioned, the board also has fiduciary responsibility to keep the common area and all amenities in condition that the residents expect. I would like to use my experience as Vice President of Finance in the restaurant industry to help improve the customer service and quality and selection of food and beverage operation to minimize the subsidy paid by all homeowners. We have been looking at that for the last several months. There are things that we think we can do, and we're looking at the possibility of maybe bringing in somebody from the outside to review the entire food and beverage operation and determine if there's some ways that we can improve it to reduce the cost of goods sold that is too high. We understand that, and it is higher than we want it to be, but we think we should be able to work with Alan and his team to lower that down in both the Mountain View as well as the preserve. Over the next couple of years, we'd like to work with the board to vote to allow residents to be able to walk their dogs on the golf course with certain restrictions, so all residents, including their dogs, can enjoy the beautiful golf course and the Mountain View. We've had a lot of questions from people saying that sometimes the walking trails that we have are not in the great condition, and they also have a tendency of burning the dog's feet. So I think that would be a welcome addition if we can have the dogs owners be able to walk with their dogs on the golf course. Part of that, we have twice as many residents that use the walking trails than any other amenity in Saddlebrook. We need to develop a committee to see how we can improve the Saddlebrook walking trails for the residents. We also need to review the number of pickleball courts compared to the number of pickleball players and add additional courts as needed. That's one of the fastest growing amenities in the country, and it's also one of the fastest growing in Saddlebrook. I think they're getting close to 1,000 members now. And we need to look at that to see if we can help improve their operation and by adding more courts if needed. And similar to that, we also have probably over 6 or 7 different dance clubs, all of which are growing. We need to review our rooms to see if we can find additional available space for these clubs so they can be able to have things. We need to continue to improve the common area of Saddlebrook. Common area needs to be maintained at least once a year. Once we're able to get through all common area once for the first year, it will be much easier in future years. The board developed a system 2 years ago where all communication from the board homeowners are responded to. We log all of the communication, and they're all responded to by the board within a 2 or 3 day period. We need to work with management to develop a system so all residents with management concerns are responded to in a minimum of 3 to 4 days. Now, that may not be the answer to the question they're asking, but at least responding to them, acknowledging that we received it, and give them some idea of when we'll get back to them. All committees that we have serve at the pleasure of the board. But I think one of the things we need to look at is to use those committees to be able to see what the communication of the residents are, and use them as like a sort of like a stepping stone from what the residents really want compared to what the committees are working on that particular time. The board has been working with all committees and trying to meet with their HOA1 counterparts at least once a quarter and we need to try to move forward towards minimizing the difference between HOA1 and HOA2, primarily in the rules and regulations and also the architectural review, but also patrol and fitness. We will, as a board, try to continue to move HOA1 and HOA1 and HOA2 closer. And we also need, last but not least, review adding to board committees for food and beverage, common area maintenance, and strategic planning. Also move the unit rep group back to a full board committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Chuck, and thank you to all the candidates for your willingness to serve our community. At this time, audience members are invited to ask questions of the candidates. We have microphones at the bottom of the stairs, both sides. If you need assistance getting a microphone to you, just raise your hand, please. Otherwise, please come to the microphone to ask a question. All right. One question per person each time at the microphone. Each question is limited to 2 minutes, and each candidate will have an opportunity to answer the question. If you have a question that you want specifically to be addressed by one of the candidates, state that. Otherwise, we'll assume that you want all 3 candidates to answer the question. Go ahead, sir.
Can you hear me okay?
Sure.
I had 2 questions, but I'll ask one first. And the question is short, the answers may not be. Each of you talked about fiscal responsibility, and we appreciate that. But the elephant in the room, nobody ever talks about other than Chuck a little bit, is unification of the 2 HOAs, which may be the biggest cost-saving opportunity available. I'd like each of you briefly to give us your view, not necessarily a commitment, but your view towards relatively soon unification. Thank you.
And can you please state your name and unit number?
Dan Kaspersky, Unit 44A.
Thank you.
Well, I'll start off. I think the unification is a good idea, but a kind of a long-term goal. We have, as I mentioned, we have been working on this for probably 2 to 3 years, where each committee tries to combine as much as possible the rules and regulations, ALC, and to try to reduce the differences between them. The biggest issue you run into is that as long as Robeson has lots up in the preserve, he has veto power over any merger whatsoever. So it's going to be 5, 6, 7 years before we're actually going to be able to combine HOA1 and HOA2, even though I think it's a great idea. As long as we continue to merge things together, and hopefully by 5, 6, 7 years down the road, we can have very few differences between them. There's also the issue of HOA1 and HOA2 have different financial reports, I guess you call it, financial statements or financial condition. And it isn't as easy as saying, I mean, I've seen out there before where people will sit there and ask somebody, do you think we should look into merging or doing everything we can to merge them? Somebody's going to say, sure, yeah, I think it's a great idea. But they don't realize that it's not going to be that easy. There's going to be, depending on what the financial condition of each HOA is at the time, they're going to, one or the other may have to put some cash in the pot at that point in time when the merger goes through if one is stronger than the other, their financial statements are stronger. So it's a great idea. I think there's some cost savings that we're going to incur, but I don't think they're going to be huge. I think the only thing you may save is some administrative expenses, but all of the common area, all the patrol, the golf course and all that, I think all that's going to stay the same. I don't think there's going to be much savings there except at the senior management level.
I'll just kind of add to what Chuck is saying. Legally, you would have to dissolve both corporations. It's very complicated, has to get a vote, maybe even, I'm not sure of this, the CCR, so, but at least a majority vote in the community, not just who votes, but every person, or even maybe a supermajority, to dissolve the corporations, and then have to reincorporate, go through re-articles of corporations. I've done this in my restructuring work. It's millions of dollars in legal costs. So, and what Chuck said, you're talking about the cost of just getting rid of one management team. That's a couple $1 million. You're going to be spending more than that, several times that, to dissolve these corporations and reincorporate.
When I was the president of the Pickleball Association and we built the initial 6 courts, I had to work very closely with the HOAs, including one, trying to get them to contribute or at least recognize the fact that we had this amenity that they didn't even want to recognize. There was a lot of animosity among the board members there. And so the first thing that had to be done was HOA1 needed to have new board members that were open to joining together. Now, corporate-wise, I think there are ways to do that without spending millions of dollars, but that has to be investigated. I truly believe it should be one HOA, one Robeson community, one Saddlebrook. We had the same problem up in Flagstaff. We had 2 associations, and we basically merged those together under one umbrella. And the only difference was that when we did our rehab of the units, their units were different than ours, so the costs were different, but we kept the same furniture, we did the same, everything was the same. And we got 2 boards together that actually, we became really good friends and worked really well together, and that's what needs to happen here.
One other item on there, as Campbell mentioned, you would have a reduction of one management team, and you'd probably have one general manager and one CFO and one HR, but because you're merging the 2 organizations together, those individuals will probably need to be paid more money because they're managing something much larger than they were originally. So the savings are not going to be as great as you think they are.
Okay, next question, if you could state your name and unit number, please.
Is this on? Ron Betschke, Unit 42, Lot 28, and board member of United Saddlebrook. I want to thank the previous questioner, Ken, for his question. And I just want to point out that SBHOA2 has undergone a study with the McMahon Group. The McMahon Group also did a study in Sun Lakes where their recommendations to merge HOAs was eventually followed. I don't know how much it cost, but it probably didn't cost millions of dollars for them to do that. But my question here is the homeowner surveys conducted by the SBHOA2 in recent years, including the one we just had, showed strong resident support for investigation of unification, not necessarily merger. Do you support a third-party cost-benefit analysis of the merger or of cooperation between the HOAs? The program that you just did specifically excluded any consultation with HOA1. Do you think that we should review that and have a program where we coordinate the strategic plans with HOA1? That's a simple question. The answer is, do you support working with the HOA1 on a joint strategic plan?
As a board member, I defer to answer that question. That's undergoing a project right now, so
I'm sorry, what did you say?
I'm not going to answer that question as a board member. That's a process we're doing right now.
I certainly object to not answering the question.
You may object, but I'm not going to answer that question.
Okay, that's good. I hope it's recorded.
Well, I think that the HOA1 and HOA2 boards would have to get together and make agreements on what that savings would be. But like Absolutely. I said earlier, I really don't think the initial savings are going to be that huge because it's a matter of savings would be for the senior management only.
That wasn't the question, Chuck. The question was whether you would support having strategic plan organization between the two HOAs. Merger, I know, is a very distant thing, and as everybody's pointed out, it may be very expensive and not save any money. But what we do have is a strategic plan that the board is now working on, but it's been worked on without input from HOA1. They may not be interested, but I would think that the board members here should be interested in trying to work on a strategic plan with HOA1 so we have one long-term goal for the community. And the question is, do you support that?
Well, I have no problem having one long-term goal as long as HOA1 is agreeable to it. That's something McMahon can talk to them about and ask them if they want to do the long-term goal, long-term strategic plan. But as it is right now, we're in the process of doing ours, and yes. I don't know where they're at in doing a strategic plan.
My thoughts on the matter are, first, you have to get the two boards to work together and to discuss these things. And then, this is a topic that should be brought up once they are talking to each other in a pleasant manner and can discuss things like this. But I agree with you. I think, to me, we're Saddlebrook. End of story. And we should be treated as Saddlebrook as a whole.
Thank you. Over here.
I'm Paulette Kaspersky, Unit 44A. I have another question about the strategic plan. One of the results of that plan was a notice that the preserve facilities were too small for the number of people that are now living there. The restaurant, the meeting rooms, the exercise room, and so forth. What are your thoughts about possible expansion at the Preserve Clubhouse?
Excuse me, I'll start. Yes, the clubhouse is very much too small. There's going to be another 100 and some odd houses built up there. That's going to make it even smaller when more people want to get into the space and use it for the restaurants, meeting rooms, very, very small fitness room, et cetera. That's something that's going to be part of the long-range planning, facilities plan. So you're right, it is too small. Whether it's designed that way or whether it was cut back early on when they were building it, I don't know, before my time. But yes, it's very small. It's going to get smaller with another 100 houses being built.
As Campbell said, that's one of the items that's going to be looked at in the strategic plan to determine, to look at all of Saddlebrook and find out where we need to allocate the funds going forward. Is it going to be increasing the size of the restaurant and the fitness center in the preserve? Do we use more money for improving the walking trails? Do we use it to build more pickleball courts? Do we use it to invest more in the golf courses? So that's one of the things we need to do, is look at how much cash that we could reasonably expect to be able to raise over the next several years, and compare that to all the different alternatives we have as far as investment in the community.
This survey that just came out and was published today, it's not the finalized survey, but that could be used as a guide to what's most important for the majority of homeowners. And those facilities are too small. However, they may have to take a back seat to some of the other more important things to the homeowners, and that's what the board is all about. So they are too small. They need to be expanded. The question is when and what's the cost.
Someone else?
I'll ask another question.
Okay.
Cheney alluded to the fact that we've been underfunding reserves, and so in order to build up our funds, we have to raise the annual dues, I would assume. So Chuck and Cheney, I don't know whether Larry can answer this. What do you think the 5-year dues would be versus what they are now, because we have to raise our reserves?
Well, as I said in my comments, I can't give you a specific number because we have no idea what the next 5 years are going to be like. But I will say this, dues are going up. We need to spend, as I said, $43 million over the next 10 years, and those statistics are 2 years old. So you can kind of get an idea that it's going to be more than that. And that is going to be going, that's just for the reserves. That doesn't account the operations of the HOA, if we have to subsidize any amenities, which we usually do. So yes, things are going up. To what extent? I don't know.
Yeah, one of the reasons last year we brought in, at the time, Invite, now it's Troon, to reduce the subsidy in on the golf course. We think we can reduce that down substantially from what it is now, and then we can also, as I said earlier, we're looking at the possibility of bringing somebody in to reduce the subsidies that we have for the food and beverage operation. But any way you look at it, Campbell's right. There are going to be, well, there's a couple, probably 3 different alternatives to bringing more money in so we can invest it in Saddlebrook. One is to increase the annual dues, which is, in my opinion, pretty high to begin with compared to other active adult communities in southern Arizona. We are either the highest or close to the highest of all them in this area. The other option we got is the way that HOA1 went, is they had one-time assessments, I think to the tune of $3,200 over the last 10, 12 years. And because they put those one-time assessments in, that's one of the reasons why their annual assessments are lower, about $500 a year lower than ours. So we're going to have to come up with a balancing act of, there's going to be some annual increases, but I think there's also going to be some one-time assessments to be able to fund the investments that are needed that Campbell mentioned. It's just sort of a balancing act. It's either one or the other or a combination of both. But one way or another, we're going to have to invest into the community to bring it to where we want it to be.
I think if you look at the study, you'll find that over half of the costs, that the $40 million you're talking about, is set aside for the golf courses. And that has to be addressed. Talking about current dues, you know, we're spending $462 each because of the loan that was taken out for this golf course. With the interest of over $1 million, that's over $2,300 per household. So there are ways to reduce that, and one thing they can do, and I was involved in reserve studies for 26 years. And over that time, what I learned about them is that they use a lot of assumptions, sometimes from people who shouldn't be doing the assumptions, and they throw it in a canned program and they spit out the results. And they handed it to the board and they said, here, this is it, it's your Bible, you should follow this. It's not the Bible. I'll give you one example. A couple years ago, our street was repaved. Didn't need it. No one went by it to look at it before they did the work. The one that really needed it was sitting right out here, Clubhouse Drive, the worst road in Saddlebrook. Why weren't those funds from our road diverted to fix this road? And then when this one was scheduled to be fixed, they could have done the side roads. That's just one example of how bad a reserve study can be and how flawed. Up in Flagstaff, they would come out and say, every 5 years you need to replace your washers and dryers. Well, if you bought the cheapest darn washer and dryer on the market, they were probably right. But if you replaced the ones you had with decent machines, they lasted 10 to 15 years. Another example of the reserve being flawed. So people have to learn what a reserve is all about, and that's not something that a board normally does. I have a lot of that knowledge, and I can impart it on the board and get a new direction going when it relates to the reserves.
Okay.
We get a reserve study, I think it's every 3 years. It's the reserve study that we got is not a Bible. The reserve study is a tool that we use to determine what we need to do going forward. Sometimes we used it. Sometimes we say things aren't needed, and we push the item in the reserve study to a year or two later because we don't think it's needed. So the reserve study is necessary, but it's just a tool that we use to be able to determine what expenses or what investment we need to make, but it's not the Bible that we automatically do every year.
Okay, sir, do you have a question?
My name is Chris Hendricks. I live at 35033 Palisade Place. I don't know my unit number. I've only been here a month. 45. Thank you. I'm also a CPA, so it's nice to see brothers up there. I also am a CPA, so it's nice to see some brothers up there. But I have 40 years of homeowner association experience, and I just come from Florida. So I just want to relay one experience on your discussions on reserves. The state of Florida took away the independence of the boards in determining reserve balances. What they basically said, they started off with condos, and the law is going to affect homeowners associations in the next year. Basically, every 3 years, condos have to have an independent assessment of their physical assets, determine what the reserve value should be, and they have to be funded within 3 years. You talk about protecting the values of our homes. The number one breaker of values of homes are what your assessments are, or if you ever issue a special assessment. So this reserve matter is very critical, and I suggest that we don't take a cavalier approach to it. There's very scientific ways to calculate reserves using insurance data, reserve experts, etc. But that's just a statement of fact. What you guys do, you guys do. One of the things homeowner associations need to do is to protect the safety and security of its residents. In the last couple of weeks, I've read concerns about people who have property where back of their landscape property is property that's kept in the wilderness, if you will, which has a potential fire hazard issue. I've seen your properties, your common property, with a lot of potential fire hazards there. I've noticed on South Palisades, the state came down a couple of weeks ago with a couple of big crews, and on their property, they did whatever they needed to do to protect it from fire. And when I just tried to get my house insured, I had to go through 5 agencies to get one to insure my house with fire because it's considered a fire risk. All I can tell you is, as a member of Insurance Board in Florida, what slowly happens when you start getting fires, the insurance companies go away, like they did in Florida, where the insurance companies that insured for hurricanes slowly went away. And now, those companies that are still in Florida have doubled the rates, and they're going up 40%. So I know in the back of my property, I've got 70 feet of land that I'm going to have manicured, clipped, or have the vegetation taken away to minimize the potential of fire that I may cause. But in back of my property is about 100 yards of your property, which I'm going to ask you to do it, because I don't want a fire in my backyard. So I think if you need to establish a committee, and you may want to use your fire department, your potential for increased insurance costs for fire, if it follows the pattern that I've seen in Florida.
I'm just going to interrupt you for 1 second. The clock, Rick, was for the questioners.
Okay.
2 minutes per question. And so I'll just ask you.
I guess I'm talking too much.
Do you have a specific question for the candidates?
Yes. What are you going to do about the fire potential that we may have here in Saddlebrook too?
I believe you said you were only been here for a few months or a few weeks.
Yes, so I don't know everything that I need to know.
I recommend you go to our website, look at a town hall we did for level 5 in common area. It's very well instructed. We had a task force working on this for many, many months. I think they put more than 1,000 hours into this. And we put into place a level 5 plan.
Okay.
Fire is one of those issues that we have dealt with.
Oh, I appreciate that, because it can be a serious issue. In Florida, people have seen their rates go up to $8,000 and $16,000 on homes that are similar in size here in Saddlebrook. So we need to take care of that, and thank you for doing it, if you did.
Yeah, the other item is level 4, which is the 8 feet right behind your house. Most homes, that's completely cleared out because of fire and pack rat issues.
Yeah, pack rats, I've taken care of
So
those.
the level 4 is the 8 feet behind your house. The level 5 starts at the 8 feet, goes usually to the cart path or golf course. So the level 4 should be cleared out for fire purposes.
Yeah, I've seen some homes that do have 20, 30 feet back of their houses, just driving to my house, that have a lot of landscaping that needs to be addressed, that brown grass, that whatever you call it. I don't know all the landscaping
Larry,
terms
do you
here.
have an answer?
Yeah. Well, anyway, thank you for taking care of the situation.
Yeah, about the only thing I can say is that behind our house, we're on the golf course, they don't show up very often to clean that out. And that's about all I can say. I think it needs a little more attention, but then it takes more labor to do that. So
Yeah.
Well, that's one of the things that Campbell mentioned that the task force put together is that the goal that the task force and the common area maintenance as of now, within the next 12 months, they're supposed to get to every area and reduce the amount of grasses and trees that are, not trees, but grasses that are there, to cut them down to a reasonable level. After that first year, every area should also have, the common area will come there once a year, but the first year is going to be the toughest because it's been overgrown for a lot of years. And the board a couple years ago approved the level 4, level 5 plan.
Okay.
But unfortunately, they didn't fund the plan. So
Yeah,
we
state-
funded it this year to be able to cut those things down and get them to a reasonable level.
Well, I appreciate that because the state officials told me that looking at Saddlebrook, thought that was a concern, but the fact that you're addressing it, that's great.
Thank you.
And this is one of the areas that cost us a lot more money than we expected this year because of the amount of labor involved in the common area. And part of that is because one of the previous boards, like I said before, they didn't fund the common area plan. The other issue is when the previous board approved the new golf course, the renovation of the Mountain View golf course, which at the time I think was going to run about $4 million. But because of inflation and supply chain issues, it ended up costing us $5.7 million. But unfortunately, when we came in as a board, they didn't fund the reserves to have enough money in the plan, in the reserves, to cover not only the common area, but also the golf course, which is why we're in such a predicament today. It's not that, we'd love to be able to go out and spend stuff, but we have to make sure that we have to fund more today because we didn't fund it several years ago. In addition to that, in 2018, 2019, prior to that, when Robeson owned it, he wasn't doing a lot of stuff that he needed to do. But so we have to do it now to make up for what he didn't do.
Okay, next question.
Bobby Freer, Unit 36, Lot 48. My question came from a statement that Larry made initially where he talked about fines and there has to be a better way. My question is, Larry, what's the better way?
Well, you can have them in there, but you don't need to threaten people with them. They can be in the paperwork, and then just a pleasant email to everybody that we're asking you to follow these rules and there are consequences if you don't. Some of the stuff that came out was almost like I'm a 7-year-old and if you do this, I'm going to spank you.
Well,
Okay, but what are the consequences? I mean, you're saying maybe we don't need a fine, but what are the consequences? What are you going to do if someone decides, I'm going to paint my house Pepto-Bismol pink, and I live right next to you?
Yeah, as I mentioned before, I'm the board liaison to the Architectural Landscape Committee, and one of the things that they have been trying to do, and the Rules and Reg 2 over the last year or so, is to, I guess you'd call it a kinder, gentler committee. And we try to warn people and we try to work with them as much as possible to make sure they're aware of the rules, and we'll give them a notice of violation and give them a chance to fix things before they're fined. But some people just go out and do it anyway. And we had cases where people go out and add a garage door that doesn't meet what the needs are, or paint something, or put new windows in, and they know they're supposed to get a permit for that, but they just completely ignore it, and they don't really care if they're going to get fined or not. But in order to keep Saddlebrook the way we want it, and the way the majority of people want it, we have to have some kind of consequences for people that completely ignore the rules. And fortunately, there aren't that many people that do ignore them, but the consequences and fines have to be there.
I'm on one committee that looks at people wanting to get their late fees waived. There are three kind of fines that I've seen. One is ALC violations. Another one is speeding. And it's not a couple miles over the speed limit. It's 10, 15 miles an hour over the speed limit. So, there has to be some accountability. If you don't have any rules, why even have anything? There's no safety here if there's no rules. You got to have consequences. You got to have accountability. You need rules and regulations, which is why we have a whole rules and regulations committee for that. Now, are some personalities involved with this? Maybe they're a little bit excessive in how they deal with some of the residents. I can't answer that. I mean, that's something that a board member is not going to get involved in.
And when I was discussing the fact that they would come out with a new rule and then a penalty, it was really about the behind your house when they did the 4 and the 5 levels. stating that a homeowner couldn't do anything about it. If they went out there and tried to fix something themselves, they'd be fined, when in fact, those areas were being totally ignored by the HOA. And so if you didn't want to have tall, dead grass out there, there wasn't anything you could do about it without the threat of a fine. My feeling was that the HOA, you know, they could have you sign a waiver, and they have insurance in case you went out there and cleaned up some of that grass yourself, and if you got hurt, that was on you. But there was no discussion of that, and that's what I was really talking about was, you know, here, you can't go out back, you can't clean up anything, because if you do, we're going to get you.
Well, 2 years ago, the board passed a board resolution, a new rule stating that anybody who wants to make any changes in the trees or brush behind their homes, they are allowed to do that. All they need to do is come in and file for a permit from the common area maintenance. They have to have a landscaping crew that is licensed and bonded and insured. They, once they get their permit, the landscaping company that they pick can go out there and make any changes that the common area maintenance has approved. And once the changes to your area are completed, the common area will go out there and make sure it was done properly. And if it's not done exactly the way you said it was going to be, then there may be a fine involved. But they did this so people can go out and make changes, because some people were complaining that there's too many trees, that they moved into the area and they used to have a gorgeous view, and now these trees have grown to 30, 40 feet, and they completely lost their views, and which is why the board put that in place. So there are ways to go out there and get changes made to your area behind your house with the common area approval.
And my concern was, if you didn't want to make a change, but just keep the dead grass that was growing a foot tall, keep it trimmed down so you didn't have that behind your home, you had to do what he just said. Get a permit, pay for a permit, have a licensed contractor come in and cut a little bit of grass for you, and then have it inspected. I think that's a little extreme. A homeowner ought to be able to go behind their fence and cut down with their whipper or whatever it is, the dead grass.
You can also go to the common area and file a request from them, and they'll come behind your home and do what you want to do next time they're out in that area. So you don't have to go out and get your landscaper. You just file a request saying, telling them what your request is, what you want them to do. You want them to cut down the grass or a tree in your area, and they'll come out and do it.
I've done that. The guy came out, cut down 2 mesquite saplings of about 20, turned around and said, "This isn't my job," and walked away.
Do we have any more questions from the audience? Okay.
If you look at our financial statement and the income statement and other income, it's usually in there, tucked in there somewhere. It's not the entire other income, but it's a portion of it. Well, we don't budget for it, no. It's in our financials. Yeah.
Okay, sir?
Yeah, I mentioned earlier that I had 2 questions, so I'm going to get to that second question. But first I have a comment. There was an earlier question about the preserve and the need for expansion and increase its capabilities. And I listened carefully to each of you, and you probably didn't mean it, but I got the impression you thought that the preserve was only for those who live in the preserve. And that's not at all true. It's a resource for all of Saddlebrook, even HOA1. For that matter, outside of HOA1, if they want to go out to the dinner, they can come in from Tucson. So anyway, it's a resource for the whole community. I think the board should remember that. But my question is more philosophical. It'll be very short. I'd like to get each of you to give a sense of your feelings as to the role and responsibility of a board member of oversight and governance versus day-to-day or near day-to-day management.
Well, people tell me, directors are there to direct. We're not there to manage. We're there to direct. We're there to direct policy, set policy, and make sure those policies are put into plans by management.
The board is there to hire the proper manager who hires the managers below him. Now, if your manager needs a little instruction, that's not considered micromanaging, that just is considered training. And I had to do that with our manager up in Flagstaff, and it took years to get him to understand the financial aspects of the whole place. Same with our manager here. I've seen emails where he has told people that he's not an accountant and doesn't understand a lot of the numbers. Then why isn't someone spending a little bit of time with him, helping him to understand those numbers? That's not micromanagement.
Yeah, I basically agree with what Campbell said, that the board is there to direct, set policy, and the management team is there to implement the policy that the board sets up. To answer your first question, I think everybody on the board is fully aware that anybody from HOA1 or HOA2 can use the facilities at the Preserve, at Mountain View, at Desert View, and also HOA1. And fortunately or unfortunately, it's one of the issues we've got is we have a lot of people from HOA1 that come over and use the exercise facility or the fitness center at HOA2, especially when theirs was closed. So we have to make sure that we understand that, as you said, that they're open to everybody.
Do we have any more questions from the audience members? Okay. 4 homeowners submitted questions electronically, and some of them have been answered, so I'm going to paraphrase. So, Dennis and Varda Main from Unit 30 write, Saddlebrook takes pride in the fact that it is better than a golf-only community by advertising its 175-plus non-athletic clubs. However, it always seems monies are spent first and predominantly on golf and not other club facilities. What is your position on the upgrading of the aging facilities versus just upgrading what seems to be too many golf courses? So, gentlemen?
Somebody mentioned earlier that the majority of dollars are spent on the golf course, and that is true. If you look at all the expenses or investments that are made to all the amenities in Saddlebrook, I think it's something like 70-75% of the investments into the amenities are for golf. Now, the golf isn't just for golf. I think anybody living on the golf course also gets to enjoy the views, and I think within the next 60 days or so, we are also going to allow people who will be able to walk their dogs, and right now they're able to walk the golf courses before and after the golfers. I do think it's an issue that we do spend an inanimate amount of money investing in our 2 golf courses compared to the walking trails, pickleball, tennis, swimming. I mean, there are twice as many people that use the walking trails that play golf. I think I heard one of the golf professionals say there's about 1,700 residents that play golf out of 5,800 residents. There's probably a little over 1,000 that play pickleball, and there's I think there's twice as many, about 3,000 to 4,000 that use the walking trail. So I think that's one of the issues we have to look at. But we got to remember that the golf courses are not just there for the golfers. The golf courses are also there for people to walk on, to people to walk their dogs, be able to use. And it isn't an easy solution, because one of the solutions people came up with is, we need to raise the rates for the golfers so that they pay for more of the golf expenses, and that way there's less of a subsidy that the rest of the homeowners have to pay. But if you follow that down the road, if you sit there and raise that too much, people are just going to go over HOA1 and play, and that's going to make the subsidies even worse. So the board has been looking at this for a while, and we're trying to understand all the ramifications of all the different options that we have, and unfortunately they aren't easy solutions.
Golf is the biggest user of our funds, reserve funds. There's no doubt. It is the elephant in the room, but it's not the only animal in the jungle. We spend over $1 million a year on roads. Every year, roads. And they're still not kept up. We have 50 miles of roads. We've got to keep that going every year. The amenities are the amenities. We are responsible for them, the board. We are responsible to keep them well maintained. Whether you use them or don't use them, it's our responsibility to keep them well maintained. Golf is 73% of the green space in this community. That's a big chunk of green space that has to be well maintained, manicured, and everything else. That takes a lot of equipment, a lot of irrigation. As you can see, when they tore up the golf course the last 6 months, there's a lot going on underneath the golf course that there is on top of the golf course. But it is a big number, and we're responsible for it. I'm sorry, as well as everything else. The pools, I'm a swimmer. I like to see the pool decks done too. We've got to put them in the right slots at the right time, but everything gets done. We're responsible for it all, and we do look at everything. There are 600 different items in the reserves components in the reserves that we got to look at. 600. And we look at them all.
Golf is the toughest thing you can have, and it's the hardest to manage. If you raise the rates too much, knowing golfers, I used to be a golfer, they'll go somewhere else. And it doesn't take a lot, bump my green fees up by $10 and I'll go to the other golf course and save my $10. So there has to be a balance where you can attract a lot of golfers, and you're still going to have to subsidize it. And all you can do there is look at the financials and say, where can we maybe save $1 here and save $1 there? But that's about all you can do.
Again, as I mentioned earlier, that's one of the reasons we brought Invite/Troon in to manage the golf courses, because they manage hundreds of golf courses throughout the country, and they're much better at managing golf courses than we have here as far as expertise. They know what they're doing. They know how to lower cost. They know how to bring more revenue in from people outside of Saddlebrook. And their plan that they gave us when we signed up with them, that within probably 2028, that they would have it down where the subsidy is below $100,000 a year, which is much lower than it is today. So we're hoping we're putting their feet to the fire and trying to make sure that they do what they promised. And if we can get them to lower that down, the amount of subsidy that every homeowner pays will be substantially less than it is today.
Okay. Don Milner didn't give his unit number, but he asks for Chuck and Campbell. Having served on the board for, he says 3 years, but it wasn't. Having served on the board previously, what were your initial campaign promises to get elected, and what specifically did you do for the homeowners against those commitments?
Well, now I got to reach back into my memory. I thought again, it's only been like a year and a half, so I think I would promise you, I tell you I tell it like I see it. I wasn't promising any flowery reduced structures and subsidies or anything like that. I promised I had a background in finance, and what I saw I would tell you and be transparent about it.
Yeah, unfortunately, I go back further than Campbell does. Mine was 2 years ago. The only thing I can remember that I promised was to try to work with the amenities, specifically golf and the food and beverage, to try to reduce them down to some reasonable level. And that, again, is one of the reasons why we brought Troon, and at the time it was Invite, but Troon in to reduce the subsidies. And I think over the next 6 months, we are going to reduce the subsidies going into the food and drug area. I'm sorry, food and beverage area. My food and drug retail is coming back, and I spent like 20 years in the food and drug industry. And no, not those kind of drugs. Those are the things that I think we have resolved or are in the process of resolving, reducing the amount of subsidy for golf by bringing Troon in. And I think, like I said, within the next 6 months that we're going to have an analysis, an audit done of the food and beverage, and I think we're going to have some successes in that also.
Okay, and he asks for Larry, and I feel like, Larry, you've already answered this, but if you want to expand, you have a couple of minutes. Explain a situation where you served on another board at another location and the specifics of what you contributed in quantifiable results.
Yeah, I think I kind of answered that, but once again, we took a failing resort, turned it into the second highest rated resort in the Western region with the lowest HOA fees of any resort in that region. What more can I say?
Okay. Before I move on, has anyone thought of a question they would like to ask? No? Okay. This question is from Robert Kumza. He lives in Unit 46. He would like your reaction to the following statements. Number one, the HOA board must be frugal in spending residents' dues. Number two, the HOA must learn to live within the current budget with minimal dues increases. And number three, I do not support special assessments for additional HOA2 amenities because supporting the current amenities and facilities are already pushing our budget to the limit. And I can repeat those.
I'll just say one thing to that. Affectionately, I had a nickname in Flagstaff, and they called me Save a Buck Larry. So I agree with him. You have to be really sensitive to what your fees are and where they're going. You also have to be very sensitive to how you're operating the facilities, and you have to keep them up to date. You have to find ways to do it with reasonable cost, and sometimes, you know, you get a bid and just take the bid, but you know, there's always alternatives, and you need to find an alternative. One example that we had up there was we had couches and furniture that looked like they belong in a commercial building, and they lasted about 4 or 5 years because of the abuse they took. I actually found a manufacturer in Phoenix, and we contracted with them to build leather furniture for us, hide-a-beds and their chairs, and we had them beef up the hide-a-beds in such a way that you could take a grown-up and bounce up and down on the thing and they wouldn't break. And when the leather went bad, we'd pack them up and send them back, and they would reskin them and build them up again. Those couches are still there 25 years later. So instead of replacing a couch every 4 or 5 years, we still have the old couches, and you know, they still look great.
Paige, could you read the first statement again?
Yes, the first statement is the HOA board must be frugal in spending residents' dues.
So yes, it must mean, to answer the question, sure, it must be frugal. We're trying to be frugal. But you also keep in mind, we're in a high inflationary environment. This country's printed $6 trillion over the last 3 years. $6 trillion. That means prices go up. And with prices going up, that means the cost of everything around here goes up for buying from top to bottom. Oil's at $80 a barrel, $85 a barrel. It was at $30 before the pandemic. So prices are going up. You can't operate frugally with this. You try to do the best you can. It's very difficult when the price of something that's a necessity goes up. You have to pay it. Even if it went up from 6 months ago, you still got to pay it, or you got to start closing things down. Living within the budget is the same thing. You put out a budget, which we're working on right now. It'll be out in a couple of weeks, maybe 3 weeks. We do the best we can trying to be forecasters and look forward. Prices change. Either you buy it or you don't. As far as do not support assessments, there are certain levers you can use to make things, there's certain levers you can pull for the budgets. You can increase dues, you can do one-time assessments. If you do the dues increases every year, there's a compounding effect which makes it even worse. Plus, we're getting compared to HOA1 for dues increases. We're already above them. If you have assessments, that could somehow govern the amount of increases that you have for your annual dues. So there's certain things you can do, but this person may not support assessments. I don't know quite how to answer that. That's kind of their personal opinion. But those are the realities of it. Prices are going up, our dues are going to go up with them.
We do as a board require 3 bids for, I'm not sure what the limit is. I think it's like anything over $5,000 or something like that. So we can't go out there and just get 1 bid for any particular item in our budget. The other piece regarding, everything out here, in my view, relates to home value. Unfortunately, it isn't an easy solution to say, well, we're going to do everything we can to improve home values, because there's a lot of variables there. Obviously, the higher your assessments are, the lower your home values are going to be. And the higher they continue to go up, your home values are going to go down. But the other side of the coin is that if your amenities, if your roads, if you have too much in the common area that's not being maintained, if the golf courses aren't right, if the pool's not good, when people come to visit, they're not going to pay as much for that house, so your home value is going to go down in that too. So there's a balancing act there to try to spend and invest as much as you can to keep everything and maintain everything to everybody's satisfaction without overdoing as far as the assessments are concerned, the annual assessments. Which is why, I think Campbell mentioned earlier, that sometimes it's better off doing a one-time, or maybe instead of a one-time doing, $400 or $500 a year for 4 or 5 years at a row instead of at one time. So I think one of the things we're looking at is doing a balancing act of some increase in the assessments, annual assessments, as well as a one-time or a 3 or 4 time increase in assessments. So that way, they're also not accumulative over the years. It's just a one-time type thing. But it's a very difficult process to try to figure out how to increase home values and steadily increase them, because you have to have, assessments have to be reasonable, and you have to have good quality amenities, roads, common area.
Okay, I have one more. It's from Jerry Hawk. He lives in Unit 36. He's heard a lot of talk regarding the upgrade of the Preserve Golf Course before the loan for the Mountain View course renovation is paid in full. Are you in favor of this? And if you are, how much debt for the Preserve project and other projects would you support?
Can you repeat that one more time, Paige?
Right, so he's heard that the board may want to upgrade the Preserve Golf Course before paying off the loan for the Mountain View project. He'd like to know if you're in favor of this, and if so, how much debt would you be willing to incur?
Well, I think what we're working on now is to provide funding for the Preserve Golf Course when it's done. We're going to do it no matter when. It's part of our responsibility, whether it's going to be, as our reserve consultants say, in the later part of the decade or something earlier. I don't know, hasn't been decided, but our goal is to fully fund that before we embark on that, so we don't have any debt. As far as paying off the loan, as it stands right now in October, the principal balance is about $5 million. If you divide that by 3,000 homeowners, that's about $1,500. That would take a special assessment to pay that off early. And which you all get to vote on. If it comes to that, you all get to vote on and tell us whether you want to do that or not. But those are the kind of things that we're wrestling with.
Yeah, and I mean, in a perfect world, I would say that we should not be embarking on some major improvements to the preserve golf course until the loan for the Mountain View Golf Course has been paid off. We don't want to have two loans out there. But one thing to keep in mind, the issues that Campbell's been working on and doing a great job at that, is that all of this happens sort of at once because of the age of the two golf courses. The Mountain View, I think, was 27 years old, and I think in the 2028, the preserve is going to be 26, something like that. So, I mean, things wear out, and the biggest things that wear out is the bunkers and the irrigation system. The irrigation systems out here, because we run them all year long, 25 years is a long time for an irrigation system to last. And on top of that, we were required by law to reduce the amount of grass that we have in the golf courses because of some kind of state law that says we need to have less grass so we use less water. But keep in mind that this is happening in preserve. The Mountain View Golf Course was in 2023, and we're looking at the preserve golf course to be somewhere around 2028. Once that is funded and done, we're not going to have any major expenses like that for a long time. So we have to get over the hump of the next 7, 8 years. Once we get over that hump, we should not have any major expenses coming in, except for things that are related to inflation. But most of those we can fund via the reserves. But that's one of the reasons why it probably makes more sense to do the funding relating to one-time assessments rather than annuals, because if we do an annual increase, that money's going to be sitting there in probably 2030, we won't need it anymore. So if you do one-time assessments to pay off or fund the preserve golf course, then that's going to be taken care of. And once we get to 2030, I think everything's going to be in much better shape.
Personally, I'm adamant against doing anything on the preserve course for improvements until the loan is totally paid off, and then maybe assess it again and push it down the road a little while they try to accumulate some funds in order to do it so they don't have to take out such a large loan and paying the bank over $1 million in interest.
Do you have a question, sir?
Yeah, I'm sorry. Just occurred to me when I was listening to this discussion. I'm new here. I'm David Horner. I live in Unit 47. I've been here 3 months. I haven't had a chance to read through all the governance documents, but I'm curious about the board's authority to assess special assessments. My understanding is there's a pretty low limit before it goes to the board or to the member approval. And is there limits on how much the annual dues can be increased annually? I know, at least I think I remember, they went up 15% last year. That didn't require member approval. Is there a limit on that? I'm unaware of it.
There's two pieces. One is the annual assessment, which right now is at $3,300 a year. The other one is the one-time assessment. Now, the one-time assessment is limited to $300 per year. Anything over $300 has to be approved by the homeowners. The annual assessment is kind of unique, which I've never seen this before, but I think it started when the bylaws and the CC&Rs were issued back in the 90s, where they said you cannot increase them more than 5% a year, or something close to that. Well, but it's cumulative. 10%. Yeah, 10% per year, but it's compounded. So if 1 year you only increase it 3%, and the next year you increase it 5%, then 30 years down the road you can increase it 50%, and it still meets the requirements.
Hey, Chuck, I hate to jump in, but the state law says 20% a year. That's state law. And we can do $300 assessments, board vote only. If you want to do a special assessment over $300, the community gets the vote on it, and it's 50% plus one of those who vote. Not the community, but those who vote. what Chuck was talking about in our CCRs is interesting little wrinkle for the numbers people here. Back in 1997, they said 10% per year compounded. But if you take that and say, okay, compounded, which means we could, if we had done that, we'd be charging $9,000 in dues right now. Obviously, we haven't done that.
Yeah, keep in mind, the limitations we have are more related to what other communities similar to ours are charging. We can't sit there and charge double what the probably half dozen other communities in southern Arizona. Otherwise, people aren't going to move here.
That just seems backwards to me. That the board, and I know you're working with the documents that were created that we've got, but for the board to be able to put in a 20% annual increase in dues, but have without membership approval, but can only ask for a special assessment of $300 before you need approval. I mean, somebody asked about paying off the debt of the one course before we work on the others. I mean, you've got the ability to charge dues to a level that can do that in a couple of years. Not that you would, but I can't be the only one that finds that level of authority just all screwed up.
That 20% is a state law. That's not us, it's not in our CCRs, that is a state law, 20%.
Okay.
Not that we're doing that, but.
But you have the ability to do it. You have the authority to do it.
We have the authority, but I don't think we've ever done it.
Okay.
Okay, and then the final question from Jerry Hawk is, do you think the CCNRs should be amended to limit the amount of debt the board can commit to before going to the homeowners for a vote of approval? And I think we just covered that. Okay. Any more questions from audience members? Oh, one more. No, it's all right.
Ron Betchke, Unit 42. This discussion about golf and everything, we know that the community has too much golf as a whole community and too much food and beverage as a whole community. So we've proven over the last 27 years that I've been here that we can't support that much amenity. So the question becomes, are we going to work with the other HOA to figure out ways that we can reduce the amount of amenities that we have at any one time to reduce these losses? I know you've said that Troon is going to do miracles, and the new management consultant for the food and beverage is going to do miracles. We'd like to see miracles happen, but they're very rare. So can you reiterate any stance you would have to coordinating with HOA1 on reducing the level of amenities to a manageable size?
Sure, the easy question, HOA can close its food and beverage and close its golf, and they can come over here. I mean, that's an easy fix. I'll vote for that anytime.
Okay. I think we wrapped up unless there are more questions from the audience. Okay, so again, the schedule is this. The voting will open on Wednesday, October 18th. You will receive an email from Saddlebrook2@ivotehoa.com. So if you don't receive it, check your spam folder. Voting will end on Wednesday, November the 8th. If you're voting electronically, you may vote up until midnight. If you want a paper ballot, you have to go to the admin office, and latest time the ballots can be dropped on the 8th for paper ballots is 3 p.m. The results of the election will be communicated to the community on Friday, November the 10th. I think that's it. Thank you all for coming.
Guess we should shut this off. Let you know how I feel. If I stumble or if I fall, would you help me back?
got too long.
Will you give me just one more night? Just give me one more night. Give me one more night, you know.
Thank you. A lot of work, I think.
Give me one more night. Just give me one more night. Give me one more night. 'Cause I can't wait for it. Like a river to the sea, I will always be with you. If you sail away, I will follow you. So give me one more night. Just give me one more night. Give me one more night.
Without a bottle of water, I can't talk.
I know there'll never be a time you'll never feel the same. And I know it's only words.
I came from Florida and I come right into a state like this.
But if you change your mind, you know I'll be here. And maybe we both can learn. I'll give you just one more night. Just give me one more night. Give me one more night. 'Cause I can't wait for it. Give me one more night. Just give me one more night. Give me one more night. 'Cause I can't wait for it.
We'll get back to water.